An Artist's Dream, the podcast where we share artists' career journeys to help you find your own path. My name is Alex, and welcome back to the show, guys. Today's episode's really cool. I have never really talked to an artist that does the things that today's guest does. Our guest today is Kerr, and they are the artists behind Umvvelt, a brand that specializes in marine animal art and conservation. I thought it was so cool to find someone who dedicated their art into the name of conservation and education. And I really wanted to talk to them more about their business and what made them want to start it. So without further ado, let's talk to Kerr and learn more about their art journey and their business. Hi, Kerr. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm really excited to interview you. Like I was telling you in our emails, my fiance actually this Friday is defending his PhD, and I actually just talked to him today, and he told me that his PhD is pretty much in what you did your schooling in.
Oh, in marine bio.
Yeah, and oceanography.
Oh, that's so cool. Do you happen to know if there's like a specific topic that he's going into or a specific area of research?
Man, he's gonna kill me because like this is like my weak spot talking about his work. But he his PhD has been focused mainly on mangrove ecology.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so he's been doing a lot of studies comparing mangroves in Louisiana and mangroves in Tanzania and basically determining whether or not mangrove ecosystems and how they're treated is important to the fish people catch and eat.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's a really great topic to always go into. Mangroves aren't particularly like the most popular habitat environment too. So it's really great to hear people like your fiance doing research in fields like that.
Yeah, for sure. And especially I grew up in Puerto Rico and we have a lot of natural mangroves there. So it's always interesting when people do talk about it and do study it because a lot of people just don't even know what mangroves are.
Right, for sure. I didn't learn about them until like I went to my local aquarium and they had a mangrove exhibit. So I was like, oh, okay, I see.
Oh, that's so cool. So let's jump right into it. This is a question I ask everybody, but everybody wants to know, like, have you been an artist or have you liked art ever since you were little?
I think I always have. Like, I remember drawing on like the walls of my parents' house in crayon. But I feel like, that's what everyone does. So I would really start to say maybe sometime around like fifth or sixth grade, I had a friend who was drawing like anime style kind of drawing. And I was like, can you teach me how to draw that too? Like, I was very nosy. I was like, can you please teach me? And that's really how I got into it. But I mean, I remember I thought it was just really cool to be able to manifest something in your mind's image and bring it to life. And that's really how I got into drawing. But I wouldn't say it would become something of like, oh, it was my full-blown passion until probably like later on in college.
Oh, okay. So that actually segues perfectly into the next question so college was when you decided to take art seriously?
Yes, that's correct.
That's interesting. And I know the answer to this question, but for people who don't know, did you go to art school?
I did not. So I went to school at Humboldt State University for a degree in marine biology. And I dropped out about, I think, halfway through my third year. So I was almost done and I dropped out.
Wow. What happened to cause that decision?
It was like a number of reasons. So part of the reason I went, like, I've always had a passion in marine biology, like, no doubt about it. It was one of the things that I valued the most in my life. Growing up in California, being near the ocean, having access to places like aquariums that really focused in on nurturing and teaching kids about, the beauty of the ocean and how cool all the animals are that live in it. So I did volunteer in high school at my local aquarium for my junior and senior year. And a lot of that, so I was an education interpreter, which basically means the people that stand in front of exhibits and talk to you on microphones. I found out that that was something I really liked, was the interaction between people who were coming in for something that they kind of had an interest in, and then getting the time to really teach them about what they wanted to learn. And then getting, you can see in their eyes, like when something is really interesting that they've never known before, and it lights up, and then they're more encouraged to do more research, and then that passion eventually evolves into some sort of action later on down the road. So when I went to university, university, a large focus of it was with research and like field work, which, don't get me wrong, it was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed being out in the field. I enjoyed, going out to beaches and on the boats and everything like that. But when it came down to the nitty gritty, I didn't see myself being in a lab and typing up reports and putting forward that kind of research. Like, I didn't think that was for me. And it wasn't really quite what I had imagined. So that's when I kind of realized, like, well, I like the education aspect of it more, but I didn't really want to go down like the traditional teaching career path,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. During that time, so it's like a combination of everything, right? So during that time, um, my art was still a hobby. I drew fan art at the time, and I had built a relatively stable community with my friends and my following. Um, and it was a really good way for me to just let out any feelings I had of frustration or stress, just because, drawing was something that was fun for me. It was something that I really liked. I had friends that drew too, so it was a community that really encouraged me to do something that I thought was fun. Um, and it became a really important part of my life, because that became um, kind of like my support beam, my support
Mm-hmm.
net. Like, I don't know what you would call it, like a support group, right?
Yeah.
Just because I was in school, far away. And I'm sure a lot of college students relate to this, where you're in a new environment, you're with people that you don't know, you may not have any family in the area, so you might feel like a little displaced. And I didn't feel like I really fit in with the class that I was in, um, because of my views of, I wasn't quite sure if research was something I really wanted to do, when it was something everybody else kind of expected to do.
Mm-hmm.
So during that time, I was picking up conventions more, and I was selling my stuff. I started making products and things like that, and that's how I kind of got the idea for Umvvelt. And then after that, that's when I decided to drop out of university, and try to pursue Umvvelt full time.
Wow, I think that's a story that I think will resonate for a lot of people, Um we just talked about this actually with Rachel from Rainy Loon the other day, about how we expect people to choose their career paths and their majors when they're teenagers, when you hardly know anything about yourself. And I think a lot of people get hung up on the idea of having to follow through on whatever you chose. But the reality of the situation is, right, you go to school, you learn more about yourself, and you realize that maybe you have different passions than you thought you did. I mean, let's be real, right? When the person you are when you're 18, the person you are when you're 20, the person you are when you're 30, like, in some cases, those are vastly different people.
Oh yeah,
And
for sure.
yeah, and sometimes that means that you have to change courses, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of times making those decisions is the best thing you could do for yourself.
Right. I absolutely agree with you.
So, when you decided to drop out of school to continue with Umvelt, was it because Umvelt was picking up steam, or was it just because you wanted to dedicate time to it so that it could be something that you dedicated yourself to?
Oh no, it was something that uh, I fought myself through for a long time, even a couple years after I dropped out of university. I didn't really start. I didn't like Umvelt wasn't a full on business
Mm-hmm.
until 2020, January 2020. That's last year.
Wow, that's really recent.
So I took my time between September 2019 and then down to December 2019 to prepare for when Umvvelt would open in January of 2020. Um, but that was like a lot of physical preparation, drawing out designs and putting in the money and the investments. Mentally, though, I really struggled with wondering if, this is the right path for me, if this was something that was feasible to do, um, if my goals would align the same with the business, or if I'm able to pull off a business that I should say, am I able to pull off a business that actually aligned with the goals that I had in mind? Because you don't see a lot of science and art put together, because a lot of people
Hmm.
view the two as, uh, as opposites. Um, and I feel like those go hand in hand. Like if you're able to get more people into science through such a popular medium like art, you could
Hmm.
get more people to, what's the word? You get people to be more open to it, right?
Yeah. And I was actually talking to my fiance about this a couple years back, that I think people fail to realize how involved art is in pretty much every aspect of everything. Like, um people don't think about it, but your all your diagrams and stuff in science books, those are done by artists. And really all communication, even in things as, as perceived detached as art, as science and math, everything is connected, because you can't really communicate ideas effectively without art, because a lot of people are visual.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and I think it using art, especially in your case where it's like very stylized art, to really get people involved in education and conservation is such a beautiful way to go about it, because what better way to get people interested than to get people, involved in something that they like visually.
Yeah, of course, of course.
And so, because your business it's such a unique kind of value proposition, right? Because a lot of, like you mentioned, there's not a lot of businesses at our level, and even at like corporate levels, that are focused on education. And I guess, what kind of led you to fully decide, like, oh, this is how I want to go about my business? And how do you go about incorporating art and education together?
Um, so, well, this goes back to my experience with volunteering, right? Like I mentioned before that I really liked informing people and talking to people and educating about like the different animals that live in the ocean, and issues that I feel need to be communicated um, in a way that gets people to understand how important it is, and encourage people to pursue action. What better way to do it in a society where, especially how great e-commerce is, and there's something in all of us, I'm sure we've all had nights where we're just sitting in front of our computer scrolling through the internet being like, what can
Mm-hmm.
I buy to satisfy the little itch in my brain so that I can get mail the next day and be like, whoa, serotonin.
Yeah.
um, and we there's that in all of us anyways. Why not take advantage of that and be like, you know what, if you're going to get something cool and something that you like, why not learn about it in the process? I mean, it's already there. Everyone does their shopping online nowadays anyways. um, People like products that are shiny and pretty, and things that appeal to the inner dragon, the little
Mm-hmm.
hoarding dragon inside their head. So what better way to communicate things that should be communicated than through things like that? Like while you're buying stuff, let me throw in a card that says, I see you like this design. Would you like to know more about the design, the animal that this design was based on,
Yeah.
and things like that? So that's how I wanted to communicate about it, because I like designing products and as is. I think it's really fun for me to design things, and it appeals to my inner hoarding dragon right in my head. That's like, oh, I want something shiny, and then the serotonin you feel when you make a product that you have a product in your hands that you know that you've created.
Hmm.
So that's kind of where it led to, where I was like, well, I like creating things, but at the same time, I didn't want to abandon all hope of just me being in marine biology. Like I still had a really strong passion for it. I still really liked it, and that's how I ultimately ended up coming up with Umvvelt, was just that combination of drawing for a field that I really liked and was really passionate about, and then trying to squeeze in, that little bit of information, and trying to combine the two. That's kind of where it ultimately comes down to.
Yeah, and I think it's totally a formula that not only works well, but I think it also just stands out because not many people are doing it. And so I caught in there that one of the ways you promote education is you put in like little cards that give information about the animal. Um, are there any other ways that you kind of try to incorporate that education into your products or for your customers?
Oh, absolutely. So one of the best ways I'm able to do this is through Patreon. Um, So I have a similar to, I know you've talked to Rainy Loon, but Rainy Loon also has couple of monthly physical rewards clubs through Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
And so mine, what I've chosen to focus is sort of a subscription club based on different animals throughout the month. And then it's a very informative kind of club. So the pin clubs, they have, you can receive a pin monthly that has fun facts on it, or the postcard and sticker club has like an informative postcard with information on the back and then a matching sticker set that goes along with it. That's something that, you can receive monthly, and then you learn about something new monthly. And that's more of a, I don't know, I don't know if you would call it a personal project for me, but being somebody who's running like a small, and like being someone who runs a small business by themselves, it's still really hard for me to personally find the time to, you know, put aside time to draw and
Mm-hmm.
create content that is not just for my audience, but something for me to enjoy. And then spending time with like 50 tabs open on Google Chrome with like all these resources so that I can study about the animal that I'm trying to teach people. And, then I got to do fact checking, and then I have to draw that specific animal. And there's like an entire different window open for just like references, and then an entire window that's open for like information. It takes up a lot of time. Like I think anybody who's been in university or even in high school knows how much of a pain it is when they have to do an essay and they have like all these tabs open, and it's just like a
Mm-hmm.
huge pain in the butt. Like I still do that. Like college has apparently never eluded me. I am still stuck in 50 tabs Google Chrome hell. And then at the same time, I'm also trying to draw and produce new content in a world where social media it exists and everything is consumed so
Oh,
quickly.
yes.
Um, so yeah, that's having Patreon and having a different source of income come from Patreon allows me to actually prioritize and set aside time for that. And it also allows me, to like I'm still learning. I know I was a marine biology major, but you don't learn everything in school. There's so much that you can learn out there just from doing your own independent research. So I think the joy of that is not only am I teaching others, but I get to learn more about the things that I might not have known about throughout the day. So that's like one main source that I've used to convey, things like education into something that's a little bit more fun. And then the other one that was mentioned is through conservation projects or donation projects that I've planned over time. So I will make a couple of decals that is for a specific nonprofit organization, and all the profits of that decal, when they're purchased, go directly to that organization. So I've done a few for some nonprofit aquariums like Monterey Bay and the Aquarium of the Pacific down in Long Beach, and also for Sea Turtles Incorporated, which, if you didn't know, back in, I believe, is it like February,
Mm,
January, February, they had that huge winter storm hit, and they had
yes.
they had a couple thousand turtles just to take care of, just because of the cold shock. So The decals that I've made have been donated to them as well. And on the occasion that I feel up for it, then I'll also do live streams where it's like donation streams. So I've donated almost $10,000 to the Aquarium of the Pacific, which is my home aquarium that I used to volunteer at. So it goes in a lot of different ways. And I'm still always trying to figure out more, like, is there something else I can do to always make it a little bit more informative or make it a little more true to my mission and my theme at the end of the day. But like I said, I only started last year, so this is still very much a growing process for me.
For sure. And I cannot imagine even where you'll be a year from now with how much you've accomplished in such short amount of time. It's really interesting to see also just the possibilities of how art can just contribute to anything that you have interests in. Like, you were able to combine art and science, and I think people out there listening that can maybe get their, you know, gears going on what can they combine art with that will kind of combine interests that they have. And this is just one super creative way of doing it that's really cool to hear about. And so, like you mentioned, you kind of started working full force on Umvelt in January of 2020. And if you don't mind me asking, is Umvelt basically your main source of income at the
Yeah,
moment?
of course, it is absolutely my only source of income. Well, I guess that depends.
Yeah.
So this also goes into, for anybody who's like curious about having a job as an artist, I think it's important to diversify your income. So don't get me wrong, my income is from Umvelt, but it's from different aspects of Umvelt. Like, for example, my Patreon supplies me with some income, while my public shop supplies me with another source of income. You know, they're still both
Hmm.
under Umvelt, but they come from, you know, two very different sources. Um, I didn't spiral into like I didn't start making money right off the bat to pay my bills with Umvelt right away. I think
Hmm.
if that's what the question kind of was. I know you're talking about full time. So prior to Umvelt, I've been drawing and posting online since 2013. Um,
Hmm.
so in that time that I've been sharing my art, I've been growing my audience since then. I started a smaller business with my best friend in 2015, which we did fan art and we attended a couple conventions for, you know, right before COVID happened. So I had a lot of experience prior to opening Umvelt. Like, don't get me wrong, I did not jump into Umvelt like not knowing what the heck I was doing. I had a lot of experience prior to that, that really helped me with how Umvelt was going to grow, because, you know, I wasn't making the same mistakes as somebody else who's starting brand new did, because I had my own experience with Coffee Ship, which was my fan art shop. Um,
Hmm.
so, but even then, you know, starting a completely new business with a completely different theme did not lead me to having a reliable source of income that I could use to pay my bills right away. Um, and I do want to talk about this too, um, just because I don't think it's acknowledged very much. But I think similar to literally like any kind of field you want to get into for any sort of job, whether it's corporate or like small business or proprietor, etc. Um, you do better with privilege, right? I don't think that's commonly
Hmm.
talked about, especially in something like art where it's so obscure and everyone's like, you know, artists are the underdogs of the corporate world, right? Like, you know, we're always there's always that idea that, oh, as an artist you're always going to be starving and poor and you're not going to make enough money, but you do this because it's your passion, and to, you know, have a job where you can do what you like and make a living from it is like the ideal goal. um, and that everybody can do it if they just put their heart into it, which, don't get me wrong, that aspect of it is kind of true. But like any other field, the more privilege you have, the it gets so much easier
Mm-hmm.
to become more successful. I think my privilege was I lived at home with, or I still live at home with my parents, or my mom to be exact. During the time that I spent the year trying to cultivate Umvelt into something more, I didn't have to worry about paying for bills, and I didn't have to worry about, um, putting a roof over my head or food on the table, because thankfully my mom was there to support me in that aspect. So because of that, the money that I made from Umvelt as profit, I was able to just put right back into Umvelt and keep growing it. Or I had the time to invest all my energy into marketing and social media, which a lot of people just don't have the energy or have time to do, because, like, and honestly, who can blame them with the algorithm on Instagram and Twitter and everything like that? Like, the insane amount of expectations Instagram alone expects you to post, like a couple times
Mm-hmm.
on the feed, like weekly, posting on your stories, making reels. Like, nobody has time for that stuff, especially if you're trying to pursue this as a business, but you also have bills to pay and you're having another job, or you're going to university. Like, it's a really, really hard thing to do and to grow naturally if you have all these obstacles, right, impending your growth. So I feel like, you mentioned, Umvelt has grown so much in 1 year, and it really, really has. Like, I'm always surprised by how much it's grown within the 1 year that I've had it. But it, like I said, like, it all goes back to, I've had, I didn't have to worry about the bills, and my mom helped me out through there, and I was able to focus more time into fostering and growing a community that would be there for me, which just a lot of people don't have time for. And that, I know this kind of got a little bit dark, but this is where yeah, I know, right? But it's like, I do want to talk about that really briefly, because everybody just kind of assumes that, if you put your mind to it, then you can do it, which, don't get me wrong, like, it's true, but it's not everybody grows at the same level, right? You have, like, technically, I said I've been growing Umvelt for about a year, maybe a year and a half now, but counting from the day that I started posting on the internet and growing that audience that was specifically catered to me, I would say that I've been posting on all that work that has put me in a place where Umvelt is right now. That took about 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody has 6 years to do that. So, when I say, Umvelt, I've been doing Umvelt full time for about a year since I started. That's not my starting point. My starting point was way back in 2013, when I actually started posting, and then um, building that audience on its own. That's a whole nother investment that you have to do in order to be successful, especially with something as popular as e-commerce nowadays.
And I'm actually very glad that you did bring that up, because I'm kind of in a similar position now. In back in December of 2020, I quit my day job as a content producer for an e-commerce website, mainly because, honestly, it was taking such a toll on my mental health working for that company, but also because it's like my career was going very far down a path I didn't want it to go down. And so, my fiance and I made the decision, for that it was best for me to probably leave, especially because with COVID going on at the time, it was still pretty, high. The jobs were not guaranteed to be around for everybody.
Of
And
course.
so I was just kind of beating it to the punch, because especially with a position like what I had, it was not an essential position within the company.
Right,
And
right.
but these are decisions that I could only make because I was privileged enough to have a fiance that can support both of us. And also, to be completely transparent, his parents have been also helping to support us. We don't live with them because his family is on the East Coast and we're in Louisiana, but they own the condo that we live in, and so they've been helping to subsidize a lot of those costs. And but from the outside, if I had never mentioned this on the podcast or on other platforms, I think people just see that I'm just, an artist living my life and everything's happy and rainbows, because a lot of artists unintentionally put out that image, right?
Of
that
course.
that like you said, you put your mind to it and you make a business and you work hard and that's successful, but that's just not the reality. The reality is that not behind every artist, but behind a lot of the artists that you admire, there is somebody behind the scenes that probably helped them get to where they are. Or if it's not a person, then just time. People, man, people have this bad habit of looking at artists and being like, they're so successful, like they're full time, I'll never get there. But like, they're not seeing the like actual years, and sometimes for some people, decades it took to get them to a place where art would sustain them, solely. They think that they did this in the past few months,
Oh
or
yeah,
or
absolutely.
they just quit their job one day and then they were raking in raking in the money, and it's like
Right.
that's so not how it works. Like, you see you know again, and this is not to bash anyone, but you see a lot of artists out there portraying this, life of like, I have this beautiful studio, I'm successful, blah blah blah. But like, I think we all have to realize there's a lot behind the scenes we're not seeing.
Of
we're
course.
we're not seeing if whether or not they have parents that are, they're living with their parents, so they have those costs covered, or they have a spouse that's covering all the bills. And another big thing that hasn't even been mentioned is student loan debt. Student
Oh my
loan debt
God.
is a huge shackle for people not to be pursuing their life's passions. And there's nothing wrong with you having to have a job that does not align with what you want, because I mean, debt is a real thing, especially if you live in the United States. Um, and that's something that you don't see for a lot of these artists. You know, when you dig into it deeper, for a lot of these artists that get to the level that they are, you find out that they either never had debt to begin with because their parents paid it off for them, or they did have debt, but they've already paid it off using a day job or something, right?
Right.
And I think these are very important conversations to have because, you know, a lot of listeners, if not all listeners, want to make a living off of art, but they can't see how that's possible because of, regular adult responsibilities like bills and debt. And these conversations are important to have, that like, um, what you see on social media, as we all know, is not always the full story. And it takes a lot to get to where people are. And some people have privilege. Some people got to start the race earlier than you did, before the gunshot went off. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
And so I think it's really good that you brought that up, because it is a part of the story that doesn't really get talked about a lot, be it because I feel like even though we're living in a time where talking about privilege is finally becoming more normalized, there's still some taboo to it. I feel like people don't want to admit that they have privilege because they want to keep up the appearance of, I accomplished this all on my own with no help. And
Right.
it's like, you know, nobody wants to take away from you the amount of hard work you've put into your business, but it's
Of
also
course.
important to recognize that for some people, that hard work was accompanied by advantages that not everybody gets.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely 100% agree with you.
And so you mentioned that in order to use Umvelt to support yourself, you emphasized the importance of multiple income streams and kind of building yourself up to being able to use the business to sustain yourself. So, how long would you say it took, I guess, from when you came up with Umvelt to when it was producing enough money that you felt like it was sustaining you? Like, how long do you think it took for you?
So I think, let's see, I started it back in January 2020. I would say around 6 to 7 months. That's the time it took for me for when it that was like the turning point for me where it just really took off. I do want to emphasize that this was like my success, and I think not just me, but a lot of people's popularity and a lot of admirable artists that people may look up to now. That stroke of luck is really what you need um, to really kick yourself off. So it's luck, it's connections. At the same time, I met Rachel, and we started talking a little bit closer around this time of the year around this time of last year. So around June or July-ish, that's when I started talking to her, and then that's where I actually worked with my very first collab was with Rachel. Rachel was really she's like a great friend. Like, she was really invested about my art. She cared about me and my growth as an artist, and as a result, she shared a lot of my content with her followers, and that in return got more people to see my work, and I got more followers as a result, and and because of that, I started getting more sales. That was because of two reasons. Right? It was because of luck, people seeing it at the right place at the right time, and then connections, right? I had a really, really, I don't know how I would describe it. Um, I was very lucky to have somebody like Rachel, who cared about my work and then wanted to see me succeed and would share my stuff in hopes of getting more people to see my artwork. And she didn't need to do that. Like, I think with any of my friends, artists or not, I do not expect them to share my work. Like, if you don't retweet my artwork or you don't retweet my post, I'm not going to come after your DMs and be like, "Why didn't you share my stuff? I thought we were friends," kind of deal.
Yeah.
Like in today's society, especially on social media, where social media is curated towards your follow, like your following is curated for you and for you only. It's really difficult to just share, especially for artists. It's difficult to share what you want nilly willy if it doesn't align with your audience's interest. So this is why, like, for example, if I retweet a smaller artist's post and they draw like fan art, for example, well, my especially, like, let's say on Twitter right now, I have 22K followers on Twitter. If I share this one post with regards to a topic that I know my audience isn't following me for, like fan art, for example, that post isn't going to get nearly as enough traction because that's not what my audience is interested in, compared to me retweeting an art post from somebody who shares nature illustrations and oceanic illustrations. Well, I know my audience is there for that because that's why they're there for me. That post would do better, right? Like, it's really difficult to just share whatever. You can't just say, you can share whatever you want and your audience will always support that. You do have to gauge your audience. You do have to know what your audience likes, because you just can't put out what you want and expect them to support you. Like, that's not always how it works. So that's where the luck comes in, right? Like, I had Rachel, who was a great friend to me, but I did not expect her to share anything about me. I did not expect her to boost my stuff, but it was her choice and her decision that she did that for me, and because of that, Umvelt was able to take off at such an alarmingly fast rate that
Mm-hmm.
that's where I got to where I was at now. Um, so that's where it started for me personally. But like I said, like, that was not. I don't think 6 months is a. It's not a very slow progress. If anything, it's too fast, and I do not think that's very normal. In my case, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I was an outlier. Like, it will not take a lot of artists 6 months to get 6 months of doing this full time to get to the point where they can sustain themselves with their bills as a proper full time job. It's just not that common. Um, so that's something I do want to point out. Like a lot of the talk that I mentioned with Umvvelt and Umvvelt specifically within this past year, it was a combination of the work that I had to do, the past 6 years prior to when I was developing my audience online, to a combination of the right stroke of luck and being there at the right place in the right time and knowing the right people who on their end wanted to do it because it was their choice to, not mine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. It's like I think that factor of luck is definitely something also that is important to talk about, because that also goes for like these larger than life companies that we all talk about or recognize. Things like Nike. You know, those companies started out as small businesses as well, and it really is usually a stroke of luck, which one thing I do want to talk about when we talk about luck on this podcast, a lot of times what we're talking about is also putting yourself out there enough to create that opportunity for luck.
Right.
Because if you're only showing up once a month on your business, your chances of hitting your quote unquote big break are much smaller than if you're, showing up every single day.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, so when we talk about luck, we're talking about also, working hard and showing up enough times so that these opportunities, like in your case, making a friend in Rachel, if you hadn't made friends with Rachel, she wouldn't have known about your work. She wouldn't have grown to love your work so much. She wouldn't have shared it. But all that started because you probably put yourself out there in the first place to even make friends with her, right?
Yeah, of course.
It's kind of about that. It's putting yourself out there again and again and again so that at some point you do hit some sort of event that causes, like a spark to set everything in motion. But that cannot happen if you're not showing up enough.
Yeah,
Or
of course.
again, sometimes with luck, sometimes it only takes you one time to show up.
Right.
we
You
just
just got to show up at the right time.
Exactly. And the fact that you don't know if that'll happen or not to you is the reason for you to do as much as you can whenever you can, because you want to be ready for that opportunity.
Exactly. And I do want to take the moment. So I want to share something that my mentor has told me. This isn't like, don't get me wrong. This isn't like an artist mentor that I have, but recently I started taking martial arts, and my Shihan, my teacher, who owns the dojo, is a business owner. So he owns his dojo as a small business, and he's working on doing it full time. And he shared so many great advices with me, and one of them that we've talked about is fortune favors the hardworking, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you're working hard enough, like, you don't want to be in a position where luck comes, but you do not have the right circumstances for it to take you that far. Working hard in it, working hard in advance so that you're ready for when luck is willing to take what you have and run with it. Like, that's what's most important, right? So, luck may be there, luck may not be there, but what matters is that persistence to keep working so that when you do hit that stroke of luck, it takes off with what you do have.
Definitely. I completely agree. You want to be ready for when luck hits, because if luck comes and you have nothing prepared, then it's just not going anywhere, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And man, that's such a great piece of wisdom for especially like this topic about starting your own business.
Mhm.
And do you have anything exciting coming up for Umvelt?
So I haven't been able to work on as many projects as I would like to, and I think part of this goes into the fact that running a small business, I do everything by myself. So I do not have a lot of time to create more
Mm-hmm.
larger projects that I normally do have. But I am excited to say that I'm in the process of I guess not hiring or being. I recently signed a contract for White Squirrel, which is a fulfillment company that artists can sign under, and they're very familiar with the small business specifically made by artists. They fulfill orders for multiple small artists, including Rainy Loon. So
Ooh.
I'm gonna be working with them next month, and they're gonna start fulfilling my orders, which hopefully gives me a little bit more time into investing and working on larger projects instead of doing things like fulfilling orders, which take up like a huge chunk of my time. So hopefully it'll free up some more time for me, and then I can really get to work on starting larger projects that I can share next year.
That's an amazing milestone. Congratulations. That's
Thank you so
awesome.
much.
Wow, yeah, I think especially once you it's so good that you recognize that you're at a level where, things have gotten to a point where you need outside help, right? Because one of the reasons you probably don't have time to create new art is because you're busy fulfilling the orders that are coming as a result of the, successful art that you have.
Yeah, yeah,
It-
for sure.
so it's so good that you recognize, that it's a good time to outsource part of your business so to allow you to create more so that you can continue growing. And I guess now we're pretty much at the end. So do you have any parting words for people who aspire to be full-time artists?
Um, yeah, don't get caught up in what you see online. That's like my number one advice. I know, particularly with a lot of artists such as myself and my friends and like Rainy Loon and Gina Draws, for example. We may seem like, super big popular artists that are living the dream, but we're all struggling each with our own problems that some of us just don't feel comfortable sharing it publicly. With things like, I know Rachel has talked about numerous times, about her not being able to draw properly because of her hand and
Mm-hmm.
body pains. I myself struggle from the difference of trying to divide my work and life boundary, and that gets in the way of me being able to work efficiently and also giving myself personal space for myself instead of being involved 100% in my job. I know Gina probably has her own issues. Like, I think Gina's still going to school. So, one of the things she's talked about with me before is whether or not she wants to do Gina Draws full time, right? So, all of us
Mm-hmm.
have our own issues that aren't necessarily talked about publicly. And most likely, your other idols or whoever you look up to will have their own problems as well. Just because we don't share them online doesn't mean they're not there. So, it's really important that, these people you look up to, what you see online is not what's always presented. So everybody goes through their own hardships and their own troubles, and I like implore you, please, like, don't set yourself up for failure by putting your own expectations to the same level as the expectations that you expect of these creators. Like, you do not give a seedling the same water that you would give a tree, right? You'll drown it and you'll kill it. Do not do that to yourself. Do yourself a favor and realize that, you need to start small and, take care of yourself in the long run, because this job, uh, it does not come full time fast. It's a long and painful process. And, you don't get to reap what you sow the next day. It might take months, it might take years. So, in that time that it takes, like, please take care of yourself. Please realize that this stuff does not come easy and it does not come fast. So, the least you can do for yourself is to cut yourself some slack. Like, if you're only starting and you're only getting like 2 orders a week, like, who cares if you're getting only 2 orders a week? Like, what do you mean? That's still 2 orders. That's still two people in the world who care and want to spend money on your stuff. And more of that will be coming. So, like I said, don't beat yourself up for it. A little, like, celebrate every single growth, every single milestone, because in the long run, it will be better for your health, and it'll help you grow better as not just as a person, but with your business too.
Couldn't agree more. And some of those words are, especially, I feel like I need to listen to those and absorb them more. So, where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, so I'm here. You can contact me through my website at umvvelt.fish. I'm also on Instagram and at Umvvelt with an underscore after, and then at Twitter at MG3KIRYU. And I think that's it. But if you can't find those places, just don't worry. It's all on my website, so you can probably just find me through there.
Yeah, and I will also include all the links down in the description box and in the show notes. You'll be able to find them very easily.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much for the interview again, Alex. I really appreciate it.
Yes, no, thank you so much for coming on. It was such a pleasure hearing your story, and I think people will definitely get a lot out of it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for having me again.
I had such a blast talking to Kerr. I just really admire their art. We have so much in common, and also just I grew up being an animal lover and ended up not working in science at all, even though I felt like my life was going that way for a while in my childhood. So it's really cool talking to someone who managed to incorporate that love of science and art and conservation all together to create a really, really interesting business. So if you want to follow them on social media, as mentioned before, all those links will be down in the description box and in the show notes. And if you want to follow me and the podcast, those links will also be down there. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, and I'm trying to be on TikTok too. Oh, and if you want to support the show in other ways, we also have a Patreon that I just opened. It would really help maintain the show. It takes a lot of hours to, bring the show and its guests to you. So if you wanted to help the show out with $1 or $2, head on over to Patreon and you'll have early access to the show, and you'll also have ability to ask the guests questions. We do take questions in from Instagram, Twitter as well, but as a patron, you will have priority. Anyways, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate all of you so much. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of the future episodes coming out. But until the next episode, this is me, Alex, saying goodbye for now, and I'll see you again real soon. Bye.